All right, so welcome everyone to our first Tuesday discussion night series presented by the Heart Hub. So to start out tonight, just a brief disclaimer that this is a legally safe space. So as hosts, we do not encourage or condone unlawful activities such as the purchase, sale, or transfer of any illegal substances. This means that we will not condone any efforts to or talk of buying and selling substances in the Heart Hub or in any of our events. We do not condone, nor do we discourage the use of psychedelics and other controlled substances. But please refer to the laws regarding the use of psychedelics and alternative substances that are relevant to your jurisdiction. Also, this gathering is informal and it is not intended as a substitute for other types of counseling or professional mental health care. We aren't here acting as licensed therapists, and we do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure diseases or mental health difficulties. We're simply here to provide a safe space for members of our community to process the contents of their experiences and receive some feedback with reflective listening. So, getting into it here. Can we put forward on the PowerPoint? So we're going to do a quick brief overview of what the Heart Hub is, and then we're going to dive into our presentation tonight with Christine. And that is the warm hug of MDMA. Can't wait for that. And we're going to have a bit of a Q&A portion, and then this recording will end and we will move into our open discussion. So what is the Heart Hub? The Heart Hub is a new community here, and we have been laboring in love to bring this to you and to co-create something new together. And so at the Heart Hub, we really seek to bring together passionate seekers who are curious about empowering their own journeys through life by responsibly and ethically experiencing expanded states of consciousness. And so in the Heart Hub, through discussion, sharing circles, retreats, courses, and workshops, and whatever else we cook up, we support, encourage, and empower each other to find what makes all of us awesome. And in community, we discover our intuition. We actively start to co-create a life of purpose, and ultimately we give back by holding space to witness others in their own journeys from a place of joy. And so why is the Heart Hub different? And when I say why is it different, we're talking, than Facebook or Instagram or any other social media platform. This is really a reciprocal community, which means you put in and you take out. So there's an energetic exchange that happens here, which you don't often see on Facebook. So our community is really about more than just consuming content and going about your day. The expectation is that there's a contribution back into this space, that, this is a space where you might find the people who you'd call at 2 a.m. with a flat tire, right? And that requires giving. And so what we really want to do here in this community is snap us out of these loops that we're used to and offer something different and create something different with you. So what is happening in the Heart Hub in January? This month, we are delving into the theme of the underworld. So we moved from the void in December down into the underworld now in January. And so the underworld is home to the fires of transformation. And often we can actually resist being in this space, or maybe try to rush through it to get to the other side. But the key is to settle in and practice surrender wherever you may be in your process. We talk about surrender a lot when we talk about psychedelics too. But that you have the power to give yourself permission to lean into this liminal in-between space. And this theme was chosen for January, as we begin our descent deeper into that soft blanket of winter. And the underworld may mirror the energy of the new year and new cycles as we review our collective revolution around the sun and decide upon our course for our next solar trip together. So this month, in the spirit of the underworld energy, the Heart Hub's invitation to you is to take time to go within yourself, or use this as a reminder to slow down and acknowledge wherever you currently are on your life's path. And if you don't sense that you're in the underworld, take this as an invitation to maybe pause and allow the things that need to fall away to do so. May we all rise together in these new cycles that we find ourselves in the coming year. And so I'm just going to touch on a few events coming up in the Heart Hub this month. We have our Feel Good Fridays series coming back this Friday, January 7th, and then 2 weeks from then on January 21st. And it runs from 12 to 1 p.m. Mountain Time. And we also have our sort of sister event to that, Thriving on Thursdays, which is happening Thursday nights, the off weeks of the Feel Good Fridays. So we have January 13th and January 27th, and those are happening from 6:30 to 7:30 Mountain Time. We have a really exciting new offering from one of our community members. And this is Moving on Mondays with Melissa. And so that event is running on Monday, January 17th from 7 to 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And then, of course, we have our next themed integration circle, which is on Saturday, January 15th, 10 to 11:30 Mountain Time. And then our next integration circle with Christine actually will be the last Tuesday of the month in January, January 25th, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And I will pop some links down in the chat on where you can find some of those events in our community. So now I will hand it over to Christine to take over and teach us about MDMA.
Awesome. Thanks, Brittany. Can you guys hear me? Has it switched over? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm Christine Grace, and I have been engaging with basically psychedelics for the better part of the last decade. And it's fascinating because as much as that's been a big part of my life, it is also something that I have not been super open about because there is generally been a lot of shame and stigma and other things around the use of psychedelics, even though it is basically what helped me become the person that I am today. And so for one of the first times ever, I am publicly speaking about what is basically one of the main tools that I've used intentionally over the last 5 years to help me develop that connection that I have to myself, develop my spiritual connection, move through states of depression and other trauma, and just generally reach a deeper level of vulnerability than I'd ever been able to before. And obviously what we're talking about today is MDMA and the warm hug of MDMA. And this quote that I chose, that one day someone is going to hug you so tight that all your broken pieces will stick back together. MDMA was that someone for me, and someone maybe doesn't fit ideally, but it was that first understanding of, well, psychedelics were, let me backtrack a little bit. It was actually psilocybin was probably my first experience where I was able to feel more whole and more in touch with who I am. And then over time, I got more into exploration of the states that psychedelics can bring. And I landed into MDMA, which I have now cultivated a deep relationship with for the last 5 years. But I am not a therapist. I didn't even finish university. I attended 4 times and dropped out each and every time. But I am I'm obsessed with learning, and I'm obsessed with growth and philosophy and understanding who we are in the world. And once I started venturing down what psychedelics can provide for me, it really showed me a better teacher, a different type of style of learning than I'd ever experienced in my life before. And that's how I view psychedelics, and particularly MDMA, but psychedelics in general, as teachers, as mentors who can shift the way that we are viewing and interacting with our life in a really extraordinary way. And generally for a lot of people, that path has been usually recreational use, then intentional use, then trying to figure out a healthy relationship with it. But it's neat, as we're going to get into here, is that is probably going to be able to shift soon, where we're going to be able to help people get right into a therapeutic relationship with these healing tools right from the get-go, with intentionality, proper support and preparation, and creating a therapeutic environment to explore these substances in a really good way. But how did I get here? So I'm born in Calgary, and I grew up with a unique family situation, as everyone does. And through my family situation, through the way I was interpreting my life, I ended up in a really deep state of depression for the bulk of my adolescence and later childhood, leading into my adulthood. And at 19, I hit my rock bottom and needed to figure out how to get out of it. As a lot of us do, we end up in the typical route with antidepressants therapy, which I'm never going to knock. Therapy is likely what taught me how to work with psychedelics in a really effective way, which is why I think they pair very well together. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But it really, truly was the shift in state and shift in consciousness that I could tap into through the use of psychedelics that was able to really target and get into some of the deeper trauma and some of the deeper things I needed to work through. But after I had started with psilocybin mushrooms when I was about 20 or 21 years old, I had my first experience of joy, my first true experience of joy that I could land in my life, that felt real. Antidepressants had been able to help shift me and elevate my mood, but the expression and experience of joy is different than an elevation in levels of neurotransmitters. It's not the same thing. And when I had that first experience of joy, it just piqued my curiosity even deeper. And like I said earlier, I just got down into discovering what else was available. And eventually I ended up in the party or rave scene, which is where MDMA is probably most famous for being interacted with or used in a fun manner. And that's where I first learned of it. And there is a distinction that I just want to make here between MDMA and ecstasy, because ecstasy is generally a combination of multiple different amphetamines that creates an exceptional high and really focuses on the euphoric aspect of what MDMA can offer, whereas pure MDMA can have actually more of a calming effect on the body than a euphoric or ecstatic effect. And in its pure form, which back in the early 2000s, late 2000s, when I was in my party years, you didn't really know if you're getting pure MDMA, like it's possible now. So I just want to first make that distinction. But through kind of all of my journeys with understanding psychedelics, I also got to this point when I needed to take a break and I needed to take a step back. And I spent years sober, studying yoga, connecting with myself in unaltered states of consciousness, and just what is it like to be me? Because as much as psychedelics are beneficial, we also need to learn how to be who we are in the world. And that was the other place that I had to get to. But eventually I came back to studying how to work with psychedelics in a more intentional way. And I came and worked with ayahuasca for a period of time. And I'm bringing ayahuasca up only simply because there's the lineage of working with it in a really intentional manner, in a really intentional therapeutic manner, that taught me a way of interacting with these altered states of consciousness, way more targeted to find therapeutic benefit than just the therapeutic side effects I was getting from some of my more recreational use before. And once I kind of learned how to do that through studying with some ayahuasqueros for a period of time, I actually just took that learning back to what I had learned with MDMA in my previous use. So before it was really fun, but I had this understanding that there was just something really magical with it that I wanted to explore at some point when I was ready. And so about 5 years ago, I started doing that. And I'm going to get into what I have learned through exploring MDMA from a very intentional standpoint. But But before we kind of get to that, what is MDMA? MDMA stands for the compound methylene dioxymethamphetamine. So it is an amphetamine derivative that was synthesized actually back in 1912. And it was used in the 70s and early 80s to support psychotherapy in the practice of psychiatry up until 1985, when a lot of other drugs became scheduled during the big war on drugs at that time. Rick Doblin, who is quite famous within the MDMA world, who is the founder of MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Science, continued to pursue the study of MDMA from 85 up until now. He's been diligent in shifting the legal status of it in a really amazing way. And by probably sometime next year, it is likely to have its status changed due to the work of MAPS, which is really, really exciting. So if you aren't very aware of MAPS or you haven't heard of them and are interested, that is one of the best places that you can go and learn about the science, learn about the research, just learn about the psychedelic movement in general. And I would definitely direct you just to going and checking out what they do. But before we kind of get into that, I just want to give you an idea of how MDMA works. And Dr. Dan Engel, who is also quite famous in the kind of brain science world, explains MDMA like this. He says that it stimulates certain areas of the brain that flood the brain with oxytocin, which is a hormone of union with ourselves, with our children, with others, and the divine. Oxytocin is a big part of the bonding that happens when people give birth to children. It's one of the big things that floods women's bodies that help them allow them to give birth to children and create a connected feeling with them. And there is also this neurochemical cascade through the serotonin and norepinephrine centers that allows the amygdala to relax, which allows the ego center to relax, which then also allows the fear centers in our brains to relax, which is also part of the oxytocin effect. When this happens, the supreme witness of ourself can come online, which allows ourselves to gain this direct and clear access to our own internal truth without the chaos or the clutter that is kind of constantly around us. Things that meditation, yoga, all these things can help with, but is done from a neurochemical and hormonal effect that is felt from head to toe in an experiential way. Other ways that it is described is as an empathogen or an entactogen. So an empathogen is something that creates a profound sense of love or connection while silencing mental distraction and creates a pure, clear connection. Entactogens are something that creates our desire or an openness to touch. So oftentimes you want to be touched or you want to touch things, or touching things can feel really good as a nice sensory input for the body. So those are two other things that are very common when we would engage with MDMA from a sensory point of view. But the biggest thing that I have personally found that MDMA provides is this clarity of access to the truth of who I am. And so things like trauma, pain, conditioned experiences, all of those start to just be seen from an unclouded lens. So for people with PTSD, for people who are going through healing deeply traumatic experiences, it helps them get out of their own way to heal the experience. Because what happens with us when we have a lot of trauma is, on top of that trauma is a fear response that comes in and kind of stifles the ability to actually deal with it. MDMA comes in and just kind of shaves off that fear response and makes it that we can drop into the experience and work through what needs to be worked through without our nervous system kicking up a fuss, without our emotions kicking up a fuss. So there's this really beautiful access to truth and to healing that when paired with psychotherapy or when paired with correct facilitation creates amazing outcomes. I'll get to that a little bit more in a little bit. But I just want to also talk a few more things about the experience. So things that you might experience within it. There's often what is known as a rolling effect, and how I can speak to how that feels in my body is it basically is just waves of different energy pulsing through the body. For some people, sometimes it makes you want to lay down. It can create feelings of euphoria. They can also be coupled with learnings within it, or messages or understandings that kind of come through the body. Shortly after onset, I personally begin to feel basically a giant exhale for the nervous system, where I just reach this state of complete clarity and inner peace that that really I've only experienced with psychedelics. And then I can get really, really quiet. I tend to spend a period of time going really internal and asking myself some of the questions that are difficult to ask oneself. But without that fear center on board, all of a sudden it becomes easy and more accessible. And because it is an amphetamine, it can have a stimulating effect. But because that stimulating effect is also paired with the downregulation of the fear and ego centers, it creates this deep, calm, warm hug experience for about 6 to 10 hours, depending on multiple factors. For me, that stimulating effect also ends up being that about for 3-4 hours, my legs or my feet shake. And from a lot of the other learnings that I've done with other traditions, a lot of that is just actually a purging out of energy or just needing to shake. It tends to actually feel quite nice, and I can shift the shaking into different parts of my body, like little thrust movements or something through my pelvis, if I feel the need to shift energy that is kind of trapped or lodged within there. Sometimes it can make your body feel like it is quite heavy. So oftentimes, even in a rave scene, you'll see people where they're laying down or really reclined against a wall, because you'll go through these flux of kind of stimulated excessive amounts of energy and then kind of relaxed. That rolling energy might kind of subside, and you end up with a more heavy or tired feeling in the body. While it doesn't tend to induce visions that are commonly thought about for psychedelics, it can create what are known as open-eyed tracers, which not everyone experiences it, but it's almost like light you can see light more as a beam than as like a light dot. So it starts to expand kind of the visionary landscape to be more linear. And for me, it actually makes my eyes kind of judder back and forth in a really interesting way that I wouldn't say contributes to the therapeutic experience at all, but it's just kind of interesting in its own right. So what does a therapeutic setting then look like? With the MAPS protocol, they have it set up where there are 2 therapists, and these are trained psychotherapists who spend time with a client for 3 preparatory sessions, and then they have 9 integrative sessions, some with and some without medicine. And what these do is the 3 preparatory sessions are to help the person prepare for the experience, prepare their body, their mind, their setting, which is often talked about in psychedelics, to be ready to go into what is likely going to be a 6 to 10 hour experience. Then there is the 2 individuals, because MDMA is such an empathogen, because it helps you build connection to others in such a deep way. Having one person there is just like a lot to rely on that one person. So it's always coupled with 2 practitioners so that they can relieve each other, and the individual is never left alone. Because while often that individual might be laying doing their inner work for 2-3 hours at a time, they generally don't want to be alone. In my own experience, my partner and I, who engage in MDMA on a semi-regular basis, we spend probably a good portion of our experience independently, but in the same room, so that we aren't alone. We still have that connection and that interaction between each other while working through and navigating our own stuff. So there's this consistent kind of co-regulation that exists between the people who are helping the individual in the MDMA space, or among me, my partner, or other people that would journey together like this. The research has shown, and the research that MAPS has been able to get is mind-blowing sometimes, but it is shown to be highly efficacious for individuals specifically with severe PTSD, and treatment is well tolerated with other comorbidities, meaning that people who have suicidality or other substance use histories that are typically not included in other research, they're actually excluded, have been included in the MDMA trials because they're trying to show that it is really such a profound treatment. And even people with these other comorbidities, with these severe cases of PTSD, are experiencing transformation to the point that 67% in their most recent study published in October of 2021, 67% of participants who received MDMA no longer met PTSD diagnostic criteria after their 18-week protocol, compared with only 32% in the placebo group. So that's a 35% difference in people who are able to not be termed PTSD through treatment anymore. It's astonishing. And for context, only about 40 to 60% of people even respond to antidepressants, and we're getting 67% of people who are able to no longer meet diagnostic criteria. So it's fascinatingly mind-blowing what they're coming out with, which is going to help move the needle on psychedelics in such a profound way, specifically with MDMA. I was recently listening to a podcast with Rick Doblin, who mentioned that they did tests on octopus, who, for people who know anything about octopus, they are traditionally very solitary creatures. They don't get together, they don't live in packs, any of this. And when even the octopus were put in water that had MDMA in it in a correct manner, the octopus went and sought out connection with other people. So it has this deeply profound ability to create connection, which just from a standpoint, even in of itself, is such a therapeutic quality, just the ability to connect to others in such a deep manner. So psychologically, what I have mainly experienced through the use of psychedelics is that it provides more, hit the wrong button. It provides more freedom for me to experience myself and review my past without any of the added charge, without any fear, without judgment. In working with my partner, how that has shown up is him and I are very honest and transparent with each other, but like any of us, there's 5% that we just kind of get scared about, or are worried are going to be judged for, or whatever. And when him and I will communicate on MDMA and get into some of those deeper layers, all of a sudden that 5% to share extra, that is going to create that extra layer of connection and vulnerability. It's not so scary. And especially when it might be a piece of conflict or of tension within the relationship, the other individual's ego center and defensive center is also turned off. So it's able to be received in a more gentle manner. So it's a really beautiful space for couples healing. And that's what I'm getting mainly the most interested in. And once the studies for PTSD are done, I would love to see how they might be able to explore it for couples work, because it just takes that kind of tension away to be able to work through some of those deeper layers within a interpersonal relationship. And so socially now, we are in a really interesting time with psychedelics, because there's a psychedelic renaissance. You know, most of us are here because we are interested in that. And it's neat because scientific people who have focused their life on going about the scientific route and getting the legalities changed, people like Rick Doblin, people like Roland Griffiths, are legitimizing what many of us have known for a really long time, that psychedelics hold a therapeutic potentiality unlike anything else. And what is needed more than anything is qualified individuals who can support people through integrating and working with psychedelics, because there is a reason to be cautious. we do not always feel ready to see or work through what is being shown to us through psychedelics. And that is often what contributes to what is known as a bad trip, is we're seeing maybe aspects of darkness that we're not ready for, or we're seeing ways. I know I had an experience once where I was shown ways that I had hurt other people in my life. And while it's hard to go through that in the moment, what it provides is an ability for us to get really real with ourselves and also cultivate compassion for the people in our life by starting to see it from a lens that isn't just ours. Because that was one of the biggest things that going through depression taught me, is I can actually have an incorrect lens in how I'm viewing the world around me. And what I find the biggest thing that psychedelics, and particularly MDMA, has been able to do is it comes in and it's like a compass for me to get right real with myself and realign to the truth that I need to be walking towards. And for society to be able to be stepping into a place where this kind of therapy might be available in the next year or two, gets me super excited. And I'm also so curious to see what's going to happen, because while I love the idea of a therapeutic setting, and I think a therapeutic setting is necessary for these experiences to become more therapeutic, I also am interested to really keep some of the sacredness and the fun and the joy that these can have as part of it. And that even if you're not in what is known as like a therapeutic setting, you could still go through and have a very profound therapeutic experience when you're set, your mindset, your physical setting, and you're cared for in an exceptional way. So who might actually benefit working with MDMA is probably one of the biggest questions. So the first one obviously is people who experience PTSD, or I actually have a coach who doesn't even like calling it a disorder because they are experiencing a current state of being, but we can, especially with what we're seeing with MDMA, we can actually help shift them out of that state of being. So he actually calls it just PTS to try to remove that label of it being a disorder. It's just a post-traumatic stress state, if you will. But people who are experiencing deep, deep states of that, the evidence is like exceptionally clear that MDMA can help people like that. It is less clear on if it works well with depression, because it does flood the brain with a lot of serotonin. And for some people afterwards, they can go into an experience periods of maybe heightened depression or kind of lower states. So it's a little bit mixed in whether it is really good for depression. And as I was saying earlier, I think some of where the magic is yet to be shown is in what's going to come about with its work with couples, and being really able to share that extra 5% with the person that we care the most about, and having that be received with love and compassion from them. And it can be a phenomenal tool for creating deeper connection and intimacy, particularly when the correct integration happens. So I also just want to touch on a few things are kind of cautions around MDMA, because while I want to make sure that people are actually feeling excited about this potential therapeutic offering that's going to be available in the coming kind of year or so, there are some things that we have to be cautious about. That it is a mild stimulant, and so people with heart conditions it's not really ideal for that. There's different evidence about whether it's safe to work with people on SSRIs or MAOI inhibitors for depression. So that would also be something that would need to be talked about. It can induce impulsivity in some people. So knowing that, kind of having caution around that when you go to engage in it is just something to be aware of. And it is not good to be mixed with other substances like alcohol, as it can create a toxic effect. And so the last couple things I just kind of want to touch on is where the magic of MDMA happens. Because while a lot of people engage with it within a rave scene, and that is termed more recreational use, experiencing joy and experiencing profound connection can have therapeutic qualities to them that I don't think it's worth just ignoring and tossing aside. While I do believe that a therapeutic setting and a more intentional setting, and I personally experienced the benefits of an intentional setting, are needed and are what we should focus on, I also want to caution against throwing aside just fun and joy. But bringing in the idea of intentionality. And that's what I truly feel is the biggest bridge between recreation and therapeutic. It's not necessarily, are you doing it with a therapist, but why are you engaging with a substance? Why are you engaging with MDMA? Why are you engaging with psilocybin? That why, that intentionality behind it is what can really help shift and create the therapeutic relationship with the experience. Because fundamentally, being supported by a coach or a therapist will absolutely make the experience generally much better, especially if it's someone you have a deep connection with. But it's the work that you're going to do with yourself and the intention you put towards what comes after the experience that is really going to create the lasting change through the work that is created within the experience. And so for me personally, when I say I started working with MDMA intentionally about 5 years ago, what that has looked like is engaging with my partner. We plan it out ahead of time. We do our prep work about why we're doing it, getting ready, what we're looking for when we are engaging with it. And then we go into an experience. And I, over the past 5 years, I've been doing this about once every 6 weeks to once every 3 months. Sometimes the intention is more for individual growth and healing, and sometimes it's more for growth within our relationship. And there's always, regardless of what the intention is, whether it's growth individually or growth within our relationship, there is always periods within the co-created MDMA experience that are solo and that are collective. Because a lot of people about halfway through an MDMA experience might end up feeling really pulled to talk out their experience, to talk out things, to work things out. That's also why it's very good to have a therapist or coach or someone that you're working with to do this kind of work. Traditionally, psychedelics have been taught by engaging with the psychedelic. In plant medicine traditions like ayahuasca, like psilocybin mushrooms, you learn from the plant, or you learn from the compound and what the compound has to teach you. And that is how I had gone about learning about psychedelics, with mentors, with people who also know that I can talk to. And I'm really interested to see how it's going to shift in the coming landscape, where we're going to have these places pop up where you can go to a doctor's office, go to a psychotherapy office, and experience these inner transformative experiences in a completely supported way by people who have been learning how to work with psychedelics for most of their life. And I'm just super excited to see what's going to happen with that. And so just to summarize, I want to just speak about some of the maybe spiritual or more mystical properties of MDMA, because this is a place within psychedelics that that there's a lot of kind of disagreement about. A lot of people have a separation between plant medicines and psychedelics that are created by human beings. And I can understand why there is this distinction. We tend to have a distinction between the natural and what might be termed unnatural. And I'm going to just pose a couple thoughts for you today to kind of sit with in how we go about kind of engaging with our kind of conceptual understanding of all these various psychedelics, and to bring them actually just under one umbrella. Because from my experience, regardless if it's been a plant medicine wisdom or a synthesized compound wisdom, I have received transformational and therapeutic experiences and connection to myself and God from all types of psychedelics, regardless if they are made from the earth or made from a human, because ultimately we are human, we are of the earth. And remembering and coming back to reconnect to our nature and our connection to the earth, if we then go and create a substance, it is no less natural than a substance that grows from the earth, because we are part of the earth. And this distinction that there are natural and unnatural substances, in my opinion, comes from this disconnect that we have to nature. And the more that we can get back into alignment with nature, we can also start to shift our interaction with other chemical compounds that can provide these transformational experiences. And I've personally really started to enjoy and find deep clarity with these pure experiences like MDMA, like psilocin, because there's now synthesized psilocybin instead of psilocybin mushrooms that have the other thing. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to watch and navigate the shifts in the psychedelic landscape, because these substances can help break ourselves into ourselves and help us really expand what we believe to be possible for ourselves and life as we know it. So thank you for listening to me talk about basically one of the biggest things I've used for my own healing for the past decade. And I hope that I've piqued your interest in wanting to know more about MDMA. As a quick disclaimer, we'll move into the Q&A, and it will be recorded, like we said at the beginning. So if you, we're going to have a personal share more discussion period at the end that will not be recorded. So it might be good for you to just tune in to which part of your share or question you might want, whether recorded or unrecorded, or you can always pop them in the chat for Brittany to ask. And yeah, I'm going to stop the slide now.
Thank you so much, Christine. That was amazing. Yeah, so we've got a question here from Douglas.
Yeah, amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I'm curious, what does it look like to do a journey with your partner on your own? Like, what's the protocol around the actual process of that journey for you?
Yeah, that is a great question. From start to finish, it is usually a tuning in that things are out of alignment. So that's the first thing is we both practice a lot of mindfulness, tuning into ourselves outside of psychedelic use. So it's noticing that either there's friction within our relationship or friction internally that we're just basically called to the medicine. We'll have a discussion about when the right time is, set aside sacred time. It always becomes a full day or at least half a day adventure. And then followed by basically a full day of integration the next day. And we basically have the first half of the day just be good things for us. So whether that's spending time alone because that's what we need to prepare for the journey, or spending time together because that's what we need to prepare for the journey. We do a check-in in the morning of what we need to get ourselves prepped and ready. And then we get ready to take M. And for me, it comes in a capsule. And we both hold it in our hand. We have a little ritual. We hold it in our hand. We speak out our intention both to the medicine and to each other. Then we'll take it, and we usually then go off on our own for 45 minutes to an hour, kind of just to go allow the come up on our own. And then, like I said, usually we migrate together, but we go through a very independent journey for probably 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes maybe only an hour and a half, usually communicating where each other are at. And then we'll come and basically unpack it while we're still on the medicine. So usually we both go through our process, and then we'll come back and talk through what showed up for us. And then if some of the intention was to work on things interpersonally, we will go into working on that. Yeah.
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 And we have a couple more also coming in the chat. Do you recall the name of the podcast that you were listening to with Rick Doblin?
Not in this moment, but I can find it and then I can post it in the Heart Hub. I'll find what it is for you for sure.
Great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. And then someone's asking, how do you determine dosage?
I just feel into it, but MAPS has determined dosage at starting, I believe max dosage is about 125, 126 milligrams. But that usually starts, I think, at about 60 or 70 milligrams, and then a booster 45 minutes to an hour in to help elongate the peak effects of the MDMA. So that's how MAPS has determined dosing. And I sometimes follow their protocol and sometimes I don't. I'll phrase it that way.
Yeah. Right, and Claudio, do you like to ask your question?
Hi, Christine. That was a great presentation.
Thanks.
I'm just curious from an addiction standpoint, what is the chance of abuse with MDMA in comparison to classic psychedelics?
That is a really, really good question. I did a training in addictions coaching, actually. It's where a company called Being True to You is where I went and got my training. And they actually do a joint training for anyone who's interested in psychedelics and addiction. So they're teaching people kind of how to conceptualize addiction and then how to use psychedelics to help heal addiction. And addiction is actually a little bit more complicated than just substance. You don't just become addicted to a substance, you become addicted to what the substance can give you and the hole that the substance is filling. So while all psychedelics have a lower, tend to have a lower addictive quality to them, I can say from my own experience, I became addicted to MDMA at an early, like 22 to 24 range. So I had to stop. I had to completely stop and give it up and move away from it because I recognized that it was an abusive relationship. It wasn't a therapeutic relationship. So my belief is any substance, anything can actually become addictive when we are using it without intentionality or without awareness around why we're using it, what it's doing. I mean, I became addicted to yoga to a standpoint because I didn't know how to function without yoga. And as silly as it sounds, I didn't know how to function if I didn't do yoga in the morning. That's an addiction, you know, and I ended up hurting myself through it. So I had the negative consequences and some other things that come from that. And so while it is an amazing question, and I think it is something that we need to be aware of, when it is paired with therapy in the way that it is, where you're trying to get to the root cause of why you feel XYZ, it'll have less of a tendency towards addiction because you're going in to try to heal the reason why someone might become addicted to it in the first place, if that makes sense.
Sorry, I have more questions if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm taking the same program actually, starting next week.
Nice.
So yeah, excited for that.
Cool.
So I'm curious, you know, with the psychedelic renaissance coming and everything, why classic psychedelics are available in Canada online, things like LSD, DMT, magic mushrooms, but you can't find MDMA. So why are other classic psychedelics so readily available?
I don't know. I can tell you my skeptical thought behind it, but I don't know the actual answer to why that's the case. My skepticism is that MDMA is actually that effective that at treating some of these underlying things that is contributing to $1 billion pharmaceutical company and the pharmaceutical industry. And I don't like to say it that transparently, but I think there are elements of that it's really hard to come into, really hard not to just say as being something that is a potential there, that they are so transformative and can really shift someone out of such a bad state of PTSD or depression or anxiety, that it would shift an entire industry so profoundly.
Okay, so my last question was, you said that within a year, you think that therapies are going to be made available to the general public for MDMA?
From the timeline that is being stated, by sometime in 2023, it should be semi-available. At what capacity, I have no idea. At what capacity in Canada specifically, I have no idea. But that is the timeline as far as FDA is concerned, as far as a lot of
So this is
people
a
within
North
the
American,
community.
more of a North American timeline, not just Canada or US.
Yeah, it's more of a North American. So MAPS exists. There's like a sector of MAPS that exists in Canada and the States, and they kind of work together. So actually the most recent study that MAPS did, they had participants from Canada, from the States, and actually from Israel as well. So they touched on different populations to show that it works effectively across different populations as well, which is really neat.
Okay.
They're really doing, like, the FDA is throwing them through the loops to show that this is effective as how, and it's crazy.
It's about time.
It's about time. It's
Yeah.
about time. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. And Christine, what was the name of that program that you trained in?
Oh yeah, they're called Being True to You, and they're a great program. And I should say they don't. How I said it earlier, I just want to make sure it's very clear. They don't teach you how to use psychedelics to heal depression or heal addiction, but they touch on what addiction is, and then how to coach addiction work, and then the positive benefits of psychedelics. So they coach on all of those things, but they don't necessarily tell you how to heal it. So just to make that clear.
Yes, definitely. Any final questions for Christine?
Perfect.
All right. Oh, hold on. Douglas is coming back in.
Yeah, I do. I just have one final question. Yeah, how do you view the safety of using MDMA in a therapeutic intention? Maybe not in a therapeutic setting with a therapist and all the other things that cost a lot of money, but just safety-wise for a layperson, if they were looking to do this, like how would you describe how it is safe?
I personally see it as quite a safe medicine, considering what I said: no heart conditions, no SSRIs, no kind of counterindications. And if you were ever contemplating engaging in MDMA and didn't know, I would just try to have a conversation with a doctor that was at least open to having that conversation, just because we do want to be very cautious around some of the counterindications. But other than those, start at a half dose. Start at a half dose. If you live in an environment where you feel safe in that environment, and you have people around you that you feel safe around and can be around safely, then I don't see why it wouldn't be a safe medicine. The one thing I will say, it does access truth. And so sometimes when we speak our truth, if that truth isn't met by someone willing to meet you at that truth, that can create a point of mild trauma or even major trauma. So that would be my biggest consideration in terms of doing it without any facilitation or any guidance with somebody who knows how to work in those states. But that would basically be it. I mean, like I said, my partner and I, we've just been working together through it, but we also have a relationship built in growth and mutual connection and deepening into vulnerability. That's kind of how our relationship is. We've done all of our ayahuasca together, all of that. So we have that type of relationship. So I want to make sure that's also clear. But yeah, working with couples and I think couples healing is definitely a trajectory that MDMA is going to take, because it's changed how we have deepened in our relationship. Yeah, my pleasure. And Claudia, do you still have a question or no? Okay, cool.
So then
Awesome.
that will conclude our Q&A portion. And just before I stop the recording, just for people that are catching this on the replay, you are more than welcome to come to some of these First Tuesday discussions. And then that way you can participate in the discussion portion, which is not posted here. And we would love for you to come check us out in the Heart Hub, and you can find us at www.thehearthub.ca. And so we hope to see you there.